Golden Axe, coming out in 1989. Just the name brings up memories to anyone who owned a Sega Genesis back in the day. Makoto Yoshida, the main developer of the project, was fond of action movies, in particular Conan the Barbarian, and wanted to make a game influenced by those films. So he and his small development team took roughly a year, and then in the end, we had Golden Axe. This was a classic side-scrolling beat-em-up that had you following the tale of one of three different heroes: Gilius Thunderhead, an axe-wielding dwarf whose twin brother was killed by the main villain, Death Adder; Axe Battler, who wielded a two-handed broadsword looking for revenge for the death of his mother, also killed by Axe Battler; and Tyrus Flare, who wielded a longsword and wanted revenge for the death of her parents. Again, you named it, Death Adder. The combat was simple and to the point, with the characters moving in a 2D side-scrolling stage, fighting off Death Adder hordes through many enemies necessary with the ability to jump and swing. Did not have any heavy or light attacks. All you could do is throw if you got close enough, however. Unlike modern beat-em-ups, you could not pick up any weapons off the combatants. You fought with what you were left, wielding your weapon of your particular character and using magic vials that you collected to hit groups with devastating magical attacks. You could also ride mounts by knocking enemies off of them and then jumping onto them. This gave you some extra firepower and an advantage over your opposition, assuming you could stay mounted long enough to make any use of it. The formula was a huge hit, with people flocking to the arcades and snapping up copies to play on their Genesis, spending hours and hours fighting off the hordes of Death Adder, just being eager for revenge on Death Adder themselves, and the glory of taking up the Golden Axe as the avatar they played as. It was so popular, in fact, that it spawned multiple sequels. In fact, one of those was Golden Axe 2, coming out in 1991, which is often criticized as a rehash of the original because it was so similar to the first, where Death Adder had again acquired the legendary Golden Axe and was set to wreak havoc on the land. Once again, our heroes from the first game step up to answer the call and take down the Death Adder, hopefully this time for good. Regardless of it being labeled as a rehash, the game sold very well and stayed true to the original with a few quality of life improvements, like being able to throw your opponent one way or another based on direction, and a back attack. Some of the magical attacks were also changed, but the effects were the same. The major change in the magic was that you didn't have to use all of it at once. You could press and hold the button to the desired level before releasing your attack. The next game in the series was Golden Axe Revenge of Death Adder. Released in 1992, this game introduced a more diverse cast, removing all the original except for Gilius Thunderhead, who did not fight alone, but sat on the shoulders of Goath the Giant. The rest of the cast included Stern Blade, the Barbarian, Dora, the female centaur, and Trix, who used a pitchfork. This game had similar combat to the first, but gave you more characters and vertical scrolling levels, along with branching paths. The combat was also tighter and the graphics far better than its predecessors. Given the fact that it was an arcade-only title, that's right, this game never hit consoles in any form that I am aware of. I am also happy and sad to say it's my absolute favorite of the series, and that I've played, even though I had to struggle for some time to find a ROM copy and to get my emulator set up right to play it. Finally, in the main series, you have Golden Axe 3. This one released in 1993. In this one, much of the game was overhauled. Branching paths from Revenge of Death Adder stayed, but the cast was all new, save Gilius, who only showed up as a non-playable character at the character selection screen. Now you had Kane Grinder, the swordsman, Sarah Barnes, the swordswoman, the Giant Road Kragar, and the Beastman Kronos Blade. This game was never officially released on the Genesis in the States, but was released in Japan on the Mega Drive. It did, however, show up on the Sega Channel, which was Sega's modem-based gaming system. Think Game Pass on dial-up, basically. It wouldn't be until the Wii that the game would really show up on consoles in America. Part of the reason for this was the graphics were more bland and the scenery more sparse. While the gameplay was overhauled, giving each character more moves, their own special moves that could be executed by inputting specific button inputs. It was considered drab and boring to bring stateside and would tarnish the Genesis reputation. The game had many good ideas, but having played this one, I can say it feels a little more stiff and difficult to control than its predecessors, and I also agree that it looks a bit bland compared to the other two. Sega would eventually try to revitalize the series in 2008 with a title called Golden Axe Beast Rider. This one followed Tyrus Flare and was universally panned for being mostly boring and mediocre. Gone was the character select screen, and you could only play as Tyrus. Much of the gameplay is what you would expect from a Golden Axe game, just in 3D this time. The combat was modernized a bit, giving you the ability to evade and parry, and cutscenes were added to make it a little more modern. However, the gameplay lacks some of the smooth polish that some of the more 3D brawlers that had hit the market, like Devil May Cry and many others, had really kind of pioneered. Thus, it gained less than a positive reception and pretty much fell into obscurity once again. The game series actually had enough popularity that it spawned multiple spin-offs, one of which was one I never knew I needed in my life until now. Only ever appearing on the Sega Master System was Golden Axe Warrior. The way I can basically best describe this is Zelda in the Golden Axe world. Basically, you play Axe Battler, and he plays Link in this game. You have the same overhead view that made Zelda so iconic. You even have a similar dungeon structure with you moving along, collecting new items and weapons. You even have towns and people to talk to. This had to have been some sort of clone of The Legend of Zelda because it was released in 1991, and with Zelda coming out in 1986 and the two looking so similar except for the lead character, I've got to imagine that they were trying to kind of cash in a little bit. But honestly, I could care less. If you're into retro games, you kind of owe it to yourself to find a Master System and dust this off and give this title a go. It looks like it's a ton of fun. I kind of want to hunt it down right now as I'm recording this, to be honest. Somebody at Sega, I kid you not, really had to love The Legend of Zelda and Golden Axe so much that the second of 3 spin-offs reminds me so much of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. This title is called Axe Battler: The Legend of the Golden Axe. Again, you play as Axe Battler. And the overhead world is basically just that. It's overhead with you navigating Axe Battler all around. Anytime you hit combat, it takes you into a side-scrolling or a single squared combat area in which you duke it out with the monsters that are on the screen. The dungeons are done in a similar manner, being a 2D side-scrolling stage. The similarities are uncanny, and I honestly have to admit, I kinda love the concept for this one too. The fact that something this cool was on the Game Gear speaks huge volumes about how underrated a handheld it was back in the day as well. The combat looks simple, with a standard jump and attack buttons being available to the player, fitting in perfectly within the confines of Sega's plucky little handheld, making it look like this kind of combat would not only work in this game, but in the game I swear it had to be emulating. The last of the spin-offs is when Sega decided to try their hands at making Golden Axe into a fighting game. You took control of one of 8 combatants, most of which looked at home in any Golden Axe game that you would want to put them in, and try to win 2 out of 3 rounds, with many of your special attacks tied to magic vials that you could get off your opponent by beating them senseless, taking their vials for their special attacks and adding it to your own, which honestly seems kind of like a clever twist on the usual super meter that's common in most fighting games. In the end though, it was mostly considered a standard one-on-one beat-em-up with not much else to offer, becoming just another blip in gaming history. Well, that about wraps it up for this, guys. I was going to do this video initially on Golden Axed, and that game turned out to be about 4 minutes long. So I decided to bring you the history of Golden Axe over the years, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, please go ahead and give it a like. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification button. That way you see more of my content as it comes out. I try to release things very regularly through the week, and all of your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you again, and happy gaming.